Luca felt a chill as he approached Beck. Her eyes were locked on the nearby grass was coated in a fine layer of frost. Luca watched as Beck dipped a broken tree branch into the goo. Beck's eyes widened as flowers grew from the dead wood. First small buds, which quickly... As quickly as they had grown, the flowers began to shrivel, and Beck dropped the stick with a grunt of disgust. Iggy took a step towards Luca, his sneer lit by the glowing puddle. Beck could see tears welling in Luca's eyes, his fists clenched. Some things about Beacon Pines were very different from the city. But a bully from a hayseed town is really no different from a city bully. Beck took a deep breath and thought. Well, time to bust out the strange. Beck stared in silence, the only sign of life being the twitch of an eye. At the sight of Iggy taunting Beck, something in Luca snapped. Iggy's smirk shifted to a look of shock as Luca launched himself into his stomach. Iggy's clothes were drenched in the glowing ooze. Iggy's voice began to slur as he struggled to get up. Person at the warehouse, this strange ooze, and what it did to Iggy. Was Rollo caught up in all of this? Beck glanced toward Luca. Rollo was safe. A wave of relief washed over. Gran is going to kill me. If he hurried, he might just make it home before sundown. Chapter 4. Our harvest. Luca took a deep breath and gingerly opened the door, steeling himself for Gran's wrath. Luca was alone. The house was empty. Luca was sitting by the pond, listening to small waves lap against a rock. His father sat in a folding chair in front without turning. He spoke. "Why don't you grab me some nice bait?" "Sure thing, Dad." Luca hopped over to the tackle box and popped open the lid. Inside was a rolling, buzzing mass. "We're fishing with bees?" Luca's father gave a warm chuckle. "Well, you catch more fish with bees than honey. Pick us out." Luca closed his eyes and plucked out a bee. He could feel its wings. Holding it at arm's length, he hurried over. His father deftly baited the hook and examined his work. "Interesting choice." With a practiced flick of the wrist, the line buzzed in a graceful arc.
He rises from the dead! Oh my god!
And do you remember how I connected?
The water accepted it without a splash or ripple. The wrong choice, but I respect it. The pond began to freeze. Sometimes we gotta make the wrong choice before we can make it right. Pallid ice propagated across the still surface with an alarming speed. Luca scrambled back as the ground beneath him turned cold. Dad, I don't understand. Sorry, kiddo. Understanding isn't always part of the deal. The relentless ice shot through the fishing line toward his father. Dad, look out! His father casually wound the reel. None of it's your fault, you know. Never was. Dad, we have to go! Luca grabbed his father's shoulders, trying to pull him away. Please, you have to run! The ice crackled as it... That's the thing about fishing, Luca. His chest began to crystallize. You toss your hook in, and you never know what you're gonna pull out. A shock of searing cold ran up Luca's arms. He gave one last desperate tug. The chair tipped backwards in a single frozen mass. Luca tried to stop the momentum, but it was too late. He watched the icy form of his father slam into the hard ground, shattering into 1,000 pieces that crowded around his feet. Dad, I don't understand. What does all this mean? The gentle rustle of leaves was the only reply. Luca's eyes struggled to focus. Faintly, he could hear Rollo amongst the noise. Rollo's voice was coming through more clearly now, but some words were still just static. The signal went silent. Luca held still, waiting for a response, his pounding heartbeat marking the passage of time. Rollo's voice began to fade. With that, the signal died for good. Luca grabbed the walkie-talkie and sprinted to the tree. Luca heard a group of foot. He dashed behind the bushes to Mr. Tolliver paused, shifting his... Mr. Tolliver took one long, quiet breath. three shared a determined look. Luca could only see a cloaked shape behind the rocket. He strained to hear as a muffled voice began. Fear gripped Luca's throat. Luca stared at the ground for a moment, trying to place the dampened voice. The figure shifted slowly from behind the rocket, revealing itself to Luca. Luca reached over empathetically. Iggy's tone jolted to dejected anger. Luca slumped to the ground, overwhelmed by guilt. Iggy slumped to his knees. Luca grabbed the walkie-talkie and headed for the window. Luca and Iggy climbed up the back of the treehouse to its roof, where Rollo had constructed his MCDC, the Mission Control Defense Cannon. From behind the crowd of clipboards, William Kerr strode forward. A warm... Kerr's smile faltered. Luca's grip tightened on the MCDC. Luca's mind raced. He was caught in a trap. What do you do when there's no hope? Iggy wiped his cheeks with a sleeve. What are you gonna do, Luca? Luca drew himself up and decided to take the only option they had left. Fight. He swung the Mission Control Defense Cannon around, aiming it confidently at the smirking face of William Kerr. Luca summoned his most insolent demeanor. Kerr turned his back on the two boys. With a nonchalant wave of the hand, he made his exit. As the clipboards began to slowly advance on the treehouse, Luca looked to Iggy with resignation in his end. That escalated quickly. Maybe discretion was the better part of valor here. Let's put a pin in this for now. Well, time to bust out the tickles. Beck lunged forward and began to tickle under Tish. Tears began to form in Tish's eyes as she... Beck redoubled her efforts until Tish finally... Iggy's eyes darted around, a realization dawning on his face that he was now out... Iggy kicked at the puddle before making his escape. Beck shook the ooze out of her hair as best as she could. Chapter 4. The best policy. Luca paused for a moment, catching his breath. He'd only just met Beck, and somehow he already managed to... Hopefully he could make it up to her. But finding Rollo was his primary Roxy and Fitz looked drained. It was clear they'd spent all day searching. Roxy's temper could often be dismissed as the impatience of an older sibling, but this was the most intense Luca had ever seen her. Her eyes were wild and unfocused, looking straight through Luca. In a torrent of rambled words and tears, Luca broke down. Roxy, still exhausted and angry, softened briefly as her eyes hunted the ground and thought. With a determined sigh, she looked up at Luca. Roxy drew herself up. Roxy tried to think of the safest place to send Luca. Luca wiped his cheeks and gave a quick nod. Looking into the puddle, Roxy rubbed her arms to warm up. Mr. Nuncree jumped with a start. Luca motioned to the phone booth. Mr. Nuncree gently placed one of his substantial hands on Luca's shoulder. Luca peered up at Mr. Nuncree. There was a deeper emotion. It was subtle, but Luca could sense. There was a shame, a deep sadness. If Mr. Nuncree was that worried about Rollo, maybe he could help. Mr. Nuncree raised an eyebrow. Mr. Nuncree's shoulders slumped. A deep sigh bellowed from his chest. Luca attempted to take a step back, but Nuncree's hand clamped down on his shoulder. With a firm shove, Nuncree manhandled Luca into the phone booth. The door latched shut with a mechanical hiss. As Luca pounced pounded the glass, the floor dropped from under his feet. The inside of the phone booth was now a loose capsule, plummeting at gravity's whim. Luca winced and pressed his hands to the walls. As he braced for impact, the capsule hurried to a surprisingly smooth stop. He felt a cold rush of air and opened his eyes with two large figures in hazmat suits occluded his view. Luca heard the deep, resigned voice of Mr. Nuncreed over an intercom. He knows too much. The end. Wait. No. This isn't the end. I know there's still much more. Somehow this went wrong. Okay, let's try something else. Well, time to bust out the strange. Beck stared, the only sign of... At the sight of Iggy taunting Beck, Iggy's smirk shifted. Iggy's voice. There was a deep sound. If Mr. Nuncreed raised an eyebrow. In the past, he found the best way to deal with an enraged Roxy was to be a little chill. Mr. Sinclair continued snoring and lifted one eyelid just enough to see, a tactic he often used to avoid. William Kerr was the CEO of Perennial Harvest Company. He had become a fixture around town over the past few years. After the failing of Valentine fertilizer, the town was hungry to welcome a new source. Mayor Augustus Valentine was not busy. Flustered, Gus instinctively After Luca's father had passed, Rollo became obsessed with them building their own Hank atomic star scraper. It was some time before Luca realized it was Rollo's way of keeping him occupied. On certain nights, when the clouds were Rollo thinks it's aliens. He always thinks it's aliens. Luca's winter coat decommissioned for the summer. With the cold holding out longer than usual, he reconsidered its usefulness. For a town that saw since Gran had moved and more covered it. One of his father's old step. Luca had spent countless, not for years though. An array of prepared meals, each labeled with the day of the week. A beginner's guide to gardening laid open on the road leading to Beacon Pines was long, a sort of natural barrier. bit much, if you ask me. Holden Wilder ran the Beacon. Dawn had dreams of becoming a big-time reporter. At night, she searched for the story that could be her big break. By day, she hawked papers. A promise? The phone booth was brand new. Part of Perennial Harvest, it didn't see much use. The Valentine Mansion loomed over every other building in town, both figuratively and literally. After the foul harvest destroyed their wealth and reputation, the Valentines shuttered off their estate from the rest of town. The path led into a... The fence Luca often asked so that he could rule out that option. Luca knew that if he gave up now, he'd never... As sparks flew from the fence, the light atop that section, 2 bulbs remained.